You want to take a bed for the man, I'm gonna make you 150.
Okay, so ready?
Okay? Right. Thank to you, members of the media, and thanks for holding on for what we consider to be a very important statement on a very critical issue. Today is merely a follow-up to the letter that we wrote to the Acting Commissioner of Police, letter dated March 23rd, requesting that he cause a criminal investigation to commence into the Petrotrin Southwest Soldado fiasco. Now, you would know that for some 6 or 7 weeks, every Sunday, a particular newspaper continue and consistently reports about inconsistencies and irregularities and alleged corruption with respect to that Southwest Soldado project. And so the trail would have been, uh, the trail of investigation would have taken that reporter to Mexico and back and investigated the findings of some bank account here in Elstree Plaza in Port of Spain. There is corruption involved in the Petrotrin Southwest Soldado project. And what we are saying is that it is not just the money involved. Yes, it is some $1.2 million US, but as a consequence of not being able to provide the facility, this country lose from 2012 to now the opportunity to gain daily some 3,000 additional barrels of crude. When you multiply that by an average of $80 US per barrel from 2012 to now, it runs into billions of dollars. So, precisely put, this country lose out on billions of dollars in revenue as a result of alleged corruption in that particular project. And we are saying that top officials in Petrotrin are responsible. We cannot agree with the Minister of Energy that Petrotrin must investigate itself and then produce a report to fool the country. No. What ought to occur here is that a criminal investigation ought to commence, and we name 3 top individuals who were named in that series of investigative reports. Namely, Lindsay Gillett, Khaled Hassan Ali, and also Dexter Daniel, all of whom we feel should be investigated to determine if any criminal wrongdoing occur. And if so, they should be brought before the court. We call, however, for the removal of those 3 gentlemen from the position they currently hold so that we can have a proper investigation conducted. We are aware too that shredding of documents has already started. And if the police didn't move swiftly, and we want to tell them that this morning, if the police didn't move swiftly to go in and seize documents at Petrotrin with respect to that project and others, they will continue to shred documents, and so that they will, all of them, and the top management, they would cover their wrongdoing. And that is why we want the police to be decisive and expeditious in handling this very important affair. This is criminal wrongdoing, and somebody must be held to account. Well, we are not going to let this issue die there. We are going to furnish the Anti-Corruption Bureau with additional information. We are going to request that they have a forensic expert, not just the police, but a forensic expert to get involved in this matter, to follow the trail of the money and to look carefully and to sift all of the information to determine and to detail who is responsible and where did that money go, and to bring the perpetrators to justice. If the police does not have the expertise, we call on the Ministry of National Security and those who are responsible for investigating criminal activity in this country to provide them with the wherewithal so that they can investigate and solve this issue properly in the interest of all of the people.
Who are you meeting with this morning? And you just spoke about shredding of evidence. Could you say if you have some of the shredding has begun?
Well, we have our sources, and we are not now or ever going to be naming those sources, but information reaching us is that they have already begun to hide and to shred uh, documents relating to this affair. And we are meeting with Inspector Fredericks, and we are going to tell him and ask of the police if they can immediately go and stop in the case where that has already begun, and in the case where they intend to so do, prevent that from happening. All in effort to ensure that the information is had so that we can have a proper and fair investigation into this. If it were ordinary workers or lower level workers involved, you would have already heard those workers dismissed from their jobs, fired. But because it's top officials in Petrotrin named in the report and who are responsible, uh, they are being treated differently. Yeah? And they have been favored. And we are saying that because they are responsible for the operations of Petrotrin, they cannot be allowed to investigate themselves. What we need here in Petrotrin is a forensic audit into the entire operations of Petrotrin, a forensic audit into the hiring practices at Petrotrin. Today Petrotrin is underperforming simply because Petrotrin has at its helm persons who don't know, don't care, no experience, and a combination of all of the above. Yeah? And for that rot to stop, somebody has to take the mantle of pointing out all of the wrongdoing at Petrotrin. And I dare say that the information that we bring to the table, it has a lot of credit because we have workers working at various levels of the operations. Yeah?
What's the update on you with Petrotrin and you're going to meet with the
Well, it's not just about pensions or me per se. It has to do with a frontal attack on the Oilfield Workers Trade Union and by extension an attack on the trade union movement. And one must see this in the broader context that if they are allowed to get away to violate the Industrial Relations Act, violate the provision of the collective agreement, and force workers who are duly elected to represent them at the highest level in their organization, force them back on the job, well then the devil take the hindmost and anything could happen. And therefore, the entire trade union movement must frown on this issue, stand up and speak out and ensure that justice prevails in this regard. We are not begging. This afternoon, the union is going to be represented at the Ministry of Labor. We are not begging. We are not asking. We demand what is rightfully ours. And what is rightfully ours is the leave to continue to be approved so that we can represent the workers who elected us to so do.
Just remind you all
And
about
it's
if you're there
supported by a
by
number of
2:30.
workers.
Yeah.
Yes.
By
Yes.
2:30 and
These are very interesting. Very much for holding on for this brief statement. In a short while, the union will be meeting with the Ministry of Labour, with a team led by the Minister of Labour to deal with this issue of secondment for top officers in the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. And in this case, the office holders are the President General and the First Vice President, and of course the Chief Labour Relations Officer. We come here today not to beg or not to ask anybody for anything. We come here today merely to put the position that was put to the company prior again on the table, that there has been established custom and practice norms, and all of the procedures speaks to the extension of leave for the President General, the First Vice President and the Chief Labour Relations Officer, all of which are not just the normal office holders in the OWTU, but are top officials of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union on secondment, and therefore we are here to demand that they respond in the positive. We are not, as I said, we are not going to ask for anything. We are not here to negotiate that position. We are very clear. And we are clear that if the company want to go one step further and victimize these office holders, myself, First Vice President and Chief Labour Relations Officer, by dismissing those workers, we are prepared to accept that dismissal, but we are not prepared, in the case of First Vice President and myself, we are not prepared to go back to work. The workers cannot give us a mandate to represent them, and the company threatens us and we go back on our jobs. That will not happen. Not happen in the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. And if you cannot, you don't have to look too far to recognize that there's ample precedent insofar as that is concerned. But let me just say one thing before we go, that silence is consent. And it is the silence of certain people that cause the employers to feel so emboldened to do what they did. The Minister of Labour stood silent when the TCL locked its workers and union officers outside after a legal strike. The Minister of Labour stood silent while NP dismissed 68 workers. He stood silent when NP appealed a judgment from the court that says that those workers should go back on their job. Now the decision to appeal had to have been a cabinet-sanctioned decision, and the minister stood silent. He stood silent when TNTech suspended all of its officers from the southern branches and elsewhere. He stood silent when TNTech appealed a judgment that the union won in the industrial court. He stood silent when Petrotrin Trinidad operation took the decision to fire a worker, the branch president, for arriving 4 hours late on his job. So you tell me, the employers felt emboldened by the silence of the minister, and we say to come now is a bit late in the day. However, his role as mediator in this is as a result of his heading that Ministry of Labour. And insofar as that is concerned, he will be doing us no favor, but he will be called to do his duty, and we hope that he do his job by insisting, telling them they need to ensure that they approve that secondment. We'll accept nothing less. If they go contrary to that, we did say there's an ultimate political price to be paid, and we are about ensuring that those who are responsible pay that price. Let me just make one point again. I wish to remind all that the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, with its Prime Minister, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, is at the back of all of this. You will take night and day, weeks and months and years. You would not convince us differently, simply because in an unbridled attack, unprovoked as it were, December the 5th last year, you recall that, in the Parliament, in a discussion in the Parliament, a debate that had nothing to do with the matter that she raised. The debate was the Procurement Amendment Bill. She raised an issue of something that happened in some 1999 and misrepresented the facts in the Parliament. And the Speaker said absolutely nothing. The Minister of Labour, sitting right next to her, was there stumping in that when she made that statement. Total abuse of parliamentary privilege. Subsequently, I wrote the Speaker asking that he had read into the records a correction to what she did, and the Speaker denied me that. So all of this is a concerted and consistent attempt to try to silence the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. We will not be bought, we will not be silenced. We stay focused and we will be relentless in defending the cause that we were put here to represent. Huh?
Mr. Roche, Petrochin said that this is quoted from a release or taken from that union leaders are given, or union executives are given.
Yeah? Yes, let me just allow the two officers to exit and to go and deal with this matter.
Yes,
Yes.
they're given 2 years, two union leaders, seconded for 2 years, and they're given an extension, a 2-year extension at the request of the union, and then a further extension, 2 years, that makes it 6 years, based on the request of the union.
Yeah.
My first question, has the union written for extensions after that 6 years?
Yes, by letter dated November 13th, the union would have written to Petrochin requesting another extension for its office holders, President General, the office of First Vice President, and of course the other officer. Petrochin did not respond until sometime in March when they sent that threatening letter to the union, threatening that if these office holders didn't come back to work, they would lose all their benefits and so on. Of course, they would lose their jobs. And so, and therefore, those offices, the Office of President General, First Vice President, and Chief Labor Relations Officer, they are not to be compared with the other offices, or where we would ask for secondment from time to time for shop stewards and branch officers to do specific duties. Those are top offices of the union. In other words, in the OWTU for 78 years, since our birth and existence from 1937 to thus far, we have just had some 5 president generals. Adrian Cola Rienzi, 37 to 43, John Ross from 43 to 62, George Weeks from 62 to 87, and Errol McLeod from 87 to 2008, and Ansel Roger from 2008 to present time. That's 5, just 5. We have had less president generals that the country had prime ministers in a longer period that they had the prime ministers. And therefore we're making the point that it is not normal. It is not normal, and that is the part of that article speaks to allowing for the extension of time for those office holders. And so the former President General would have stayed for some 21 years, and prior to that 12 years. So when you add all of that, is somewhat 21, 30 plus years, 33 years. Yeah, he has had many extensions. And so the custom practice norm and so on associated with that is well established, and they are aware of that. In any event, should the company have a concern about that, they ought not to have been threatening in a letter as they did by threatening the union to send back, to go back or else, choose or lose. No, we will not be threatened.
But don't you think it's time then you renegotiate that collective agreement you would have had in relation to the extensions and so put it down in black and white and, you know.
Well, there are a number of things that comes out of experiences where you now give rise to negotiations and so on. But that is not to say that what you have has already been established, and on the basis of that establishment, you will claim your right in that regard. And so this has been custom and practice and well-entrenched procedure with respect to these office holders, and especially the office of the President General. And therefore, we will not be treated any less today. I mean, could you imagine the magnitude of what has been done here? It is tantamount to the most brazen and bold-faced attempt to mash up the union, to have its President General, First Vice President, the one who would act for him also, back on their jobs. So the union has no leadership. If they're allowed to get away with this, all trade unions in this country better be prepared for their day of reckoning. And therefore we are not about to allow them to get away with this for the sake of the jobs. Let me make one more point for those sycophants who are on the blogs and so on. Don't read them, but people tell me about them. I have a total disregard for people who hide behind the secrecy of a blog and so on. In any case, they are being paid by the cabinet to do that. And I want to say this. The agreement caters for payment for all its officers who are on secondment. That is to say that once you are outside, the company would pay. But in the case of the office of the President General, the company do not pay. that office. The union pays. So it's not a case of the company paying and would want to recall me, or it's not a case of the exigency of the operation and they need us back in the operation. It is pure spite, wickedness and vindictiveness and on the part of the Prime Minister and her cabinet given to Petrotrin's minions the task to get at the union. Yeah? They could say what they want on their platforms. We know exactly what is afoot here and we will deal with them in due course. Yeah? We understand how the politics works.
Okay, Mr. Roger, earlier on you met with the Anti-Corruption Bureau.
Yes.
Could you give
Very
us an
interesting.
update?
Very interesting meeting. We had a 1 hour and 45 minutes meeting with Superintendent Fredericks and Inspector Lewis of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. And we are most encouraged by what came out of those discussions. As a matter of fact, certain people, top officials in the company, are going to be paid a visit shortly in pursuit of this investigation. Investigation has commenced. Yeah? And we know them. We know them. I'm not now going to name them, but they are going to be paid a visit by the police. So we are asking that those top officials in Petrotrin don't run, don't hide, stay fixed, stay put. The police is coming to look for you to investigate all of the wrongdoing that would have occurred in that Southwest Soldado project. They must not get away with that. It's corrupt, and those who steal from the public must be held to account. Yes, and we are not even ruling out. We are not even ruling out that investigation taking the police as far as Mexico to talk to particular individuals with respect to that alleged corruption that took place. Yeah. So all of those who are plain pious and sanctimonious and holier than thou and can do no evil, can speak no evil, the record says to the contrary. And therefore, ours was the responsibility to, if we believe that a crime has been committed, report it to the police and cooperate with the police and give the police all of the information. And that is what we are doing. We are prepared to cooperate fully with the police to ensure that the police unearths using whatever expertise, internal and external, to ensure that those who are found guilty, that they are brought to justice. We stand waiting to see the outcome of that. They ought to be in jail. The two continue so that we can get to the bottom. Yeah? Thank you very much.